There's been a lot of FUD coming out about BlackRock and their involvement in Bitcoin, and can they change Bitcoin? So this is my opinion, first and foremost of this video. This is an opinion piece. I know you guys have opinions, so feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Let's get a conversation started. This is really important things to think about and have these types of thought experiments. So what is the FUD? That BlackRock now owns a majority share of 5 of the most, I think the biggest mining companies for Bitcoin. And what does that mean? As a majority shareholder, they can dictate how that company functions, basically. It's what BlackRock does best. They are the majority shareholder of, like, I think over 87% of the S&P 500. So they're really used to telling businesses how they should function. And one of these concerns that BlackRock is obviously forcing on a lot of different corporations is the ESG narrative. And for those of you who don't know what that is, go ahead and DuckDuckGo it, and we're going to continue on in this video. So obviously proof of work has been battled for a long time now over their energy use, energy consumption, and being energy efficient. And an obvious clap back to that has been proof of stake, especially with Ethereum moving from proof of work to proof of stake, even though that was planned for years in advance, far before this ESG narrative was ever pushed on the public. So I have 4 points here I'm going to go over. The first one is that people think that BlackRock can somehow make miners fork Bitcoin into being proof of stake. There's a lot wrong with that sentence that I just said, and for those of you who are well versed in cryptocurrency, you already know. The first one being that miners run software. They do not code. They are not the developers. They are not the ones responsible for writing the code that would allow Bitcoin to move from proof of stake to proof of work, first and foremost. Secondly, the thought of a mining operation, which by now is a billion-dollar industry, to voluntarily make moves to make themselves irrelevant just does not make sense. They would be effectively signaling to end their own business if they were to be running the code that would point towards proof of stake. If you are familiar with the history of Ethereum, there was a difficulty bomb that kept being delayed, and the miners of Ethereum were not excited about the move to proof of stake. Do you remember FW, the ETH proof of work coin, because they tried to keep running that coin, or that original proof of work blockchain of Ethereum. There's also Ethereum Classic. I'm going on a tangent, but before I do that, basically just understand that BlackRock controlling, I mean, I don't need the air quotes there, if they are controlling the mining operations because they're majority shareholders, that alone does not give them any power of moving to proof of stake. And I would be really interested to see how they would even get them to sign off on that. The second point that I've heard is that BlackRock might be able to force people to use this new version of Bitcoin, this proof of stake version of Bitcoin, or whatever they would want to fork Bitcoin into and then force people to use. First of all, you cannot force anyone to use any currency unless it is declared legal tender. And I think it's a pretty far cry from Bitcoin being declared legal tender, at least in the US. It has been declared legal tender in other places like El Salvador, but again, they are heavily invested in El Salvador. They're heavily invested in the mining operations of Bitcoin using volcanic technology. But for BlackRock being a US-based company, and obviously they're in control of other US-based mining operations, for them to force the use of Bitcoin would only be applicable towards US citizens. And thirdly, I've had this talk with Toby many times, and he's always quick to remind me, but the problem that I see with all of this is that why would they be investing billions, perhaps trillions of dollars to achieve this control over Bitcoin, when it would ultimately most likely result in the value of that very asset to collapse? Because there are still millions of people that use cryptocurrencies that value the very things that BlackRock would need to sacrifice in order to achieve this goal. Now, Toby says they don't care about money, they care about power. And that is a very valid point. But how would they justify this? Why? Because Bitcoin has been hard forked plenty of times before. And those new versions of Bitcoin just still don't have the market share of Bitcoin as we know it as the #1 market cap crypto of today. I know that there's no guarantees in crypto, and there's a whole lot of ways that this could play out in the future. And don't get me wrong, the involvement of BlackRock in cryptocurrencies and their interest in owning Bitcoin, obviously they're going to want to control what they own. That's why they own a majority, over 87% of the S&P 500. They like to control things, right? So let me know what you think in the comments down below. What holes are in my argument? What do you disagree with? What are some risks that you think I'm not realizing? And let's talk about this. Let's get these conversations going, because the cryptocurrency space is still developing, and us as end users can vote with our feet, can vote with our investments. And how is your best way of avoiding a BlackRock doomsday scenario, basically. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. If you guys enjoy this, hit like, hit subscribe. I'll see you tomorrow.